I was just making tea when it happened. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet moment in an ordinary kitchen. When I look back, that was the night everything in my family began to shift. If you're watching this, tell me where you're listening from, or what time it is on your side of the world. The kettle clicked off with that soft, hollow sound electric kettles make when they're finished. Outside, the streetlights had just come on, and the windows were tinting into that muted blue evening. I remember thinking the house felt too large for one person. Not lonely, just open, like the air could echo if I breathed too deeply. That happens after a loss. Space expands faster than you do. My name is Thomas, 67, retired. I spent most of my life working with numbers, budgets, reconciliations, quiet things that demand accuracy and patience. My late wife, Nora, used to joke that I was born with a ruler instead of a heartbeat. She meant it kindly. She always did. The house still holds her. In the small details, her handwriting on a label in the pantry. Third, mug, she insisted, was the right size for morning. Coffee. The photograph of our children, Evan and Claire, taken when they were still small enough to climb into our laps without needing a reason. That photograph sits on the mantel by the living room window. The frame is silver, slightly tarnished around the edges. I straighten it every few days, not because I need it straight, but because it feels like a conversation, a quiet one. I was carrying my mug into the living room when my phone buzzed. I remember the vibration more than the sound. It was late for calls. I expected Claire. She checks in more than she needs to. But the screen showed another name, Evan. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. Not for any dramatic reason, we just drifted. He always had somewhere to be, something to prove, a deal to hold together. I always assumed he'd find his balance one day, the way most of us eventually do, when life stops waiting for us to mature and simply demands it. His message was short, almost too short. Dad, can we talk soon? There was no punctuation, just urgency pressed into 7 plain words. I sat down, not because the message frightened me, but because I could feel something beneath it. A weight he didn't name. Sons rarely ask for help directly. They send signals, like smoke rising behind a hill. I looked at the photo on the mantel, both my children smiling, Evan's arm around Claire's shoulders. He must have been 9 at the time. Claire maybe 6. Nora stood behind the camera, telling them to smile like you mean it, not like you're pretending. There are moments where memory and present time overlap so completely you forget which one is real. I lifted the photo frame and wiped a smudge of dust from the glass. My hand paused there, just resting. The metal was cool, smooth, familiar. On the back of that frame, tucked between cardboard and hinge, is a folded letter. Nora wrote it years before she got sick. Not a farewell, not a goodbye, just a request. A gentle one. Keep them close, Thomas. Even when they make it hard. I didn't open it that night. I didn't need to. I know every word by heart. I texted Evan back. Tomorrow evening works. Come by after work. I didn't tell Claire. Not yet. She worries easily, and her concern can sometimes feel like sorrow. I wanted to see what this was before involving her, before assuming the worst, but something in me already knew the ground beneath our family was shifting. That night, I walked through each room before sleeping. It's a habit I developed after Nora passed. Checking lights, closing curtains, making sure the world stays just outside the glass where it belongs. There's comfort in routine, in things that can be controlled. Yet the mind is a restless thing. As I lay in bed, I kept hearing those words again. Dad, can we talk soon? People think tension begins in arguments, but no, it begins in silence, in the pause before the truth appears. I didn't know then what my son wanted. I didn't know he would bring papers to my table, or that he would speak softly, carefully, like someone carrying a story with sharp edges. But I knew this. Something was coming, and I had no idea which memory in that photograph would be the one to break. Evan arrived earlier than expected. He knocked twice, lightly, like he wasn't sure he wanted to be heard. "Where you're listening from, or what time it is right now." I opened the door, and there he was, my son, 35 years old, wearing a tailored coat and shoes that cost more than my monthly groceries. He had always dressed like he was auditioning for a life slightly larger than the one he lived. Sharp outlines, crisp fabrics, controlled presentation, but his eyes told a different story. They were tired. Not physically, financially tired. You learn to recognize that kind of exhaustion. "Hey, Dad," he said. He stepped inside without waiting for me to invite him. He used to do that as a child, walking with the confidence of someone who believed every room belonged to him. That used to make me proud. Lately, it felt like a warning. I led us to the kitchen table, the same one where he and his sister once did homework, argued about crayons, spilled juice for no reason at all. The table has history in its grain. He sat down quickly, hands flat on the surface, like he was bracing for something. Small talk came first. It always does when real conversations hide behind it. "How have you been? House looks good. You still taking walks in the morning?" Words without substance, words that stall time. Eventually, quiet arrived, the kind of silence that means the mask has to drop soon. Evan cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, as if that was a casual topic. "The future is usually expensive," I replied. He laughed. Too quickly, too loudly, then stopped. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a folder. Thick, neat, intentional. That was the moment I felt the shift. Not fear, just awareness. This was not a visit. This was a presentation. He slid the folder toward me like a dealer sliding cards across felt. "These are just some planning documents," he said. "Nothing urgent. I didn't touch it yet. Paper holds more meaning when you don't rush it. I think it's better if we streamline things," he continued. "Simplify the estate. Make it more efficient. I've already spoken to someone who can help draft everything. Someone. Not Claire. Not me. Not our family attorney. Someone else." I felt a quiet pressure behind my ribs, the feeling of something being rearranged without your consent. "Estate planning," I repeated slowly. "That's a serious subject," he nodded. Too eagerly. "Yeah, well, it's better to get ahead of these things. Makes everything smoother." He spoke like a financial advisor, or a man in debt trying not to look like he is. I finally opened the folder. Inside were draft revisions of my will. Clean formatting, modern font. Terms rearranged like furniture, in a house I no longer recognized. My name at the top. My signature. Line at the bottom. Blank. And a clause. Halfway down, transferring primary property rights to him. Only him, no shared inheritance, no equal division. No mention of Claire. The air in the room dropped a few degrees. "Why is your sister not included in this?" I asked. Evan didn't look surprised by the question. He had prepared for it. "She doesn't need it," he said. "She's stable. She's fine. I could actually use the house. It would open things up. It just makes sense." The words were delivered like logic, but logic without empathy is just strategy. "So this is about need?" I asked quietly. "It's about practicality," he replied. There was a time I would have believed that. Not anymore. I closed the folder and placed my hand on top of it. Not claiming it, just steadying it. "Evan," I said, "your mother wanted things to be equal. Fair." For the first time since he arrived, something flickered in his face, annoyance, or maybe fear. "Mom isn't here," he said. The sentence landed hard, not loud, but final. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that rearranges. Walls. I looked at my son, not the polished coat, not the tired confidence, not the presentation. The child who once asked me to tie his shoelaces because he said knots felt like puzzles. Something in me softened, and something in me hardened. I pushed the folder back toward him. "I'll review this," I said, "but not today." He nodded as if that was enough. But it wasn't. He knew it. I knew it. When he left, the door closed softly, too softly, and the house felt even bigger than before. I didn't go to sleep right away that night because I didn't just have documents on my table. I had a question. When did my son stop seeing family as family and start seeing it as leverage? I didn't sleep much after Evan left. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the house wrapped in the kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise. Sometimes silence doesn't rest beside you. It sits on your chest, your city, or your time zone. Just so I know I'm not sitting in this memory alone. By morning, the kitchen felt colder. I made coffee, the way I always do, 2 scoops, slow pour, long stir. Routine keeps the world from leaning too far in one direction. But my hands were a little unsteady, enough that the spoon tapped the side of the mug a few extra times. I didn't need to call Claire. I knew she would call me first. She always feels the shift before it's spoken. My phone rang at 9:12 a.m. Claire. Her name on the screen softened the room a little. "Morning. Dad?" she said, voice warm, steady, familiar. "Morning," I answered. I wanted to sound normal. I don't think I did. She paused, a soft inhale, practiced in reading things I don't say aloud. "He was there, wasn't he?" she asked. I didn't ask how she knew. Children grow up, but some instincts don't fade. "Yes," I said. He came by. Another pause. This one heavier. What did he want? I looked at the kitchen table. The folder was still there. Closed. Too quiet for what it contained. "He brought documents," I said. "Estate revisions." She didn't respond immediately. I only heard the small sound of her breathing. Like she expected this, but hoped she was wrong. "He wants the house, doesn't he?" she finally said. Her voice didn't shake. But there was something else there. Disappointment layered under grief. Layered under acceptance. "Yes," I said softly. I heard a shift on her end. Footsteps, maybe pacing. "I need you to listen carefully, Dad," Claire said. Her tone was different now, not emotional, not upset, strategic. Evan's been making moves, borrowing, negotiating, trying to hold something together. I don't know what, but it's big. I closed my eyes. That was the confirmation I didn't want. "He didn't say anything about money," I murmured. "Of course he didn't," she said. "He can't come to you honestly. He knows Mom trusted you to be the balance, so he's trying to go around you." There it was, the truth sitting openly between us. "Claire," I began. "No," she said gently. "Don't defend him. Not this time." Her voice cracked just slightly. The sound of someone who has loved their sibling longer than they've been disappointed in them. "He's been distant with me too," she continued. "Short calls, rushed words. He keeps saying things like, 'It'll all make sense soon.' He's hiding something. And whatever it is, it's pushing him to desperate decisions." I walked into the living room, staring again at the photograph on the mantel. The one where both of them were laughing without the weight of adulthood. "He said it was about simplifying things," I said. Claire exhaled, a slow, tired sound. "That's not simplification. Dad, that's erasure." The word landed hard. I sat down in the armchair, the one Nora used to knit in. The fabric is faded on one side from sunlight. I placed my hand where hers used to rest. "Do you remember what Mom told you?" Claire asked. "Quiet now." "The letter?" Of course I remembered. I always remember. "Keep them close," I said, "even when they make it hard." Claire was silent for a moment. the kind of silence where someone is trying not to cry. "I think Mom knew this part would be the hardest," she whispered. I reached into the drawer of the small side table and pulled out Nora's letter. The paper was soft now from being unfolded and refolded over the years, her handwriting still steady, still graceful. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. Sometimes holding something is enough to remember what it says. "I'll handle this carefully, Claire," I said. "I know you will," she answered. "Just don't let him corner you. Not emotionally, not legally, and not out of guilt." Her voice wasn't angry. It was protective. My child, protecting me. After we hung up, the house didn't feel quite as empty. But it didn't feel safe either. Not yet. I looked again at the folder on the table. I hadn't signed anything, but the real danger wasn't paper. It was the pressure behind it. I knew then that this wasn't simply about property. It was about power. And power never asks. It assumes. The next time I would see Evan, everything would be different. Evan didn't come alone the next time. He brought Marissa with him, and before either of them said a word, I knew this visit wasn't really about family. It was about persuasion, influence, direction. Do you believe people show their true intentions in their eyes or in their tone? I opened the door, and there she was, Marissa, composed, polished, elegant in a way that felt rehearsed rather than natural. The coat, the perfume, the smile, everything placed, like items arranged for a showroom. "Thomas," she said warmly, as though we were old friends. "It's been too long," her voice carried the softness of someone who has learned exactly how to sound. Non-threatening, but her eyes were scanning, not greeting, measuring. I stepped aside to let them in. Evan walked a half-step behind her. Not leading, following. People tell you who holds control without meaning to. They sat at the dining table. The same table as always, though today it felt like a negotiation desk. Marissa placed her bag neatly at her feet and folded her hands on the table, like she was preparing for a board meeting. "I hope we didn't catch you at a bad time," she said. "You're here now," I replied. "Let's talk." Her smile didn't move. Not an inch. Some smiles are masks, perfectly fitted, airtight. "We just wanted to make sure there weren't any misunderstandings," she began. "About the estate planning documents." Evan nodded beside her, a fraction late, like he was waiting for her cues. I studied her posture, relaxed, confident, assured, a person who believes the conclusion has already been agreed to. "Estate planning is a big responsibility," she continued, "and with Claire being busy with her own life, we just want to help lighten your load." There it was, the angle, the repositioning. Turn Claire from daughter to distraction. Turn Evan from beneficiary to helper. "Claire isn't a burden," I said. Marissa's smile flickered, only for a half-second. But I saw it. A micro crack, the kind that reveals strategy beneath kindness. "Of course she isn't," she said quickly. "We just mean Evan can take on the logistics. The property upkeep, the legal filings. It makes logical sense." I didn't respond. I let the silence do the work. People fear silence more than confrontation. She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed packet of numbers. Projected rental value of the house, projected maintenance costs, projected property taxes. Pages full of financial assumptions designed to sound like inevitability. She placed it in front of me with gentle precision. Printed business projection analysis, bound with a thin metal clip. On the bottom corner of each page, a faint watermark with Marissa's company name. That same watermark I would later find on the altered estate document. "This isn't just emotional, Thomas," she said softly. It's practical. Her tone suggested reason, but the subtext was pressure. I leaned back in my chair. You seem very invested in this, I said. Evan's jaw tightened. Marissa didn't blink. I'm invested in our future, she replied. In stability. In what's best for all of us. For all of us. Not the family. Not his sister. Us. Meaning her and Evan. It was subtle, but it was clear. Claire should be part of this discussion, I said. Marissa smiled again. That same perfect, polished curve of lips with no warmth behind it. I'm sure Claire means well, she said, but she tends to get emotional, and this requires clear thinking. There it was, dismissal disguised as concern. Minimization disguised as reason. She has always been the one who notices things, I said. Marissa's fingers tensed slightly, barely visible, but visible enough. Evan finally spoke. Dad, we're just trying to make things easier. You don't need to go through pages and pages of legal language. We already reviewed everything. You can just sign. Just sign. The same phrase con artists use, the same phrase desperate men use. Same phrase gamblers use at the table when the chips are running low. I didn't look at Evan. I looked at the papers. Numbers were off, not dramatically, but intentionally. Adjusted to create the illusion of burden where none existed. This wasn't planning. This was positioning. And I realized then, Marissa wasn't influencing Evan, she was piloting him. I closed the folder gently. I'll read everything, I said. Carefully. The room cooled. The smile stayed on her mouth, but not in her eyes. Of course, she said. Take your time. But time was exactly what they didn't have. And they knew it. When they left, I didn't watch them walk to the car, stood at the window and watched the driveway after. They were gone. Some storms don't arrive with thunder. They gather quietly. One conversation at a time. Waited until evening to look at the documents. Again, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because I wanted my mind to be still when I did. Do you read things slowly, or do you skim and hope for the best? The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after visitors have left traces of themselves behind. Perfume in the hallway, a chair pushed in differently, the faint shift of air that lingers after tension. I sat at the dining table, the same table where meals, birthdays, apologies, and arguments once lived. Now, it held paperwork, and the uncomfortable truth that paperwork can sometimes speak louder than people. I laid out both sets of documents. The estate draft, I remembered, the one Evan brought, side by side, like two versions of the same story, told by different historians, have always believed that paper doesn't lie. People lie through paper. The first few pages matched. Language consistent, formatting identical, tone neutral. It almost lulled me into acceptance. Almost. Then I reached page 2. The page number was correct, but the spacing wasn't. The margins were narrower. The paragraph breaks had different rhythm, the subtle cadence of a different, hand shaping the structure. You learn to notice details when you've spent your life inspecting numbers. I took a slow breath and read the altered section again. My home. The home Nora and I built over 32 years was designated to transfer to Evan immediately upon filing, not after my passing, not after shared discussion, immediately. That one word changes everything. A house becomes leverage. History becomes collateral. Family becomes transaction. Chill moved through my ribs, the kind that doesn't come from cold air, but from realization. I retrieved the original page 2 from my file drawer. I placed both versions beside each other. Same sentence structure in some areas. But the final paragraph? Rewritten entirely, not revised, replaced. Someone hadn't edited the estate document. They had rebuilt it, deliberately, to look familiar enough to pass a quick glance. And then I saw it. Not in the text, in the paper itself. I lifted the new page up toward the lamp, tilting it slightly. There, faint, almost invisible unless you were searching, a watermark. The same watermark I had seen on the business projection packet Marissa left on my table, her consulting company logo. A minimal geometric symbol. Perfectly centered. Perfectly confident. Perfectly careless. People often hide the truth in plain sight when they believe you won't question them. I leaned back in my chair. The room felt different now. Narrower, more pointed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a difference in opinion. This wasn't even Evan's idea. Not entirely. This was a plan. A designed orchestration. Pressure disguised as guidance. Concern disguised as strategy. And the person who designed it was someone who believed I would not look closely. That age meant compliance. That grief meant softness. That memory meant fragility. They forgot who I was. They forgot what I do with silence. I pulled out a yellow highlighter, the same one Nora used for recipes she liked. I highlighted the altered paragraph in the forged page 2, then highlighted the original one, side by side. Truth illuminated. The contrast was quiet, but devastating. Evan didn't just want the house. He needed it, urgently, desperately. A house as collateral, a father as convenience, a sister erased as if fairness were optional. I closed my eyes, not in pain, but in clarity. I thought of Nora's letter, her handwriting soft, steady, honest. Keep them close, Thomas. Even when they make it hard. I had tried. I still would. But closeness does not mean surrender. I opened my phone and hovered over Claire's name, then stopped. Not yet. Not until I understood the full extent of what had been altered. Rushing is how mistakes are made. And this situation had no room for error. I gathered both pages, placed them in a labeled folder, and slid it into the drawer. Not hidden, not secret, just waiting. Storms do not need thunder to be real. They can form quietly, one changed sentence at a time. And the first drop of rain had already fallen. I didn't call Evan after discovering the altered page. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Sometimes the truth needs to sit for a while so the shape of it becomes unmistakable. What you do, call immediately, or wait. The next morning, I took a slow walk around the neighborhood. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that doesn't threaten rain but settles like a weight on your shoulders. People walked dogs. A jogger passed. Life continued its routines, perfectly unaware that mine had shifted. When I returned home, I made tea. Routine again, stirring, not rushing. The phone rang just as I sat down. Evan. I answered on the third ring. Dad, he said, with a tone that was trying too hard to sound casual. Hey, we were thinking. Maybe we should all get together. You know, a family dinner? Family dinner. A simple phrase. But his voice carried the urgency of someone trying to stage a scene, not share a meal. When? I asked. Thursday, he said quickly. 7, here at the house. I'll cook. Evan rarely cooks. Marissa controls presentation, which meant This invitation did not come from sentiment. It came from strategy. "That's soon," I said. "Yeah, well, it feels like the right time," he replied. The right time. For who? For him? For the signatures he hoped to secure? For the impression he wanted to create? Perhaps. "All right," I said, my voice even. "I'll be there." I could almost hear his exhale, relief mixed with eagerness. Good. Great. And maybe don't mention anything to Claire yet? There it was. Pressure. Direction. Control disguised as convenience. "I'll speak to Claire when I feel it's appropriate," I said. Silence on the line. A small silence. But silence always tells the truth. "Okay," he said finally. "Thursday, then." We hung up. The house settled back into stillness. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed with a calendar notification: family dinner. Thursday, 7:20 p.m., created by Evan Hale. Shared with Marissa Hale. Not shared with Claire. Deliberate. Curated exclusion masked as efficiency. I stared at the screen, thumb resting above the remove button. But I didn't touch it. I tapped accept. Not because I agreed, but because some truths need an audience. I called Claire that evening. When she answered, her voice carried the same warmth as always, but also the quiet alertness of someone bracing for what they already suspect. "He invited me to dinner," I said. She exhaled. Soft, controlled. "So it's happening," she murmured. "Yes," I replied. "Thursday." "I'll come," she said immediately. "He didn't invite you," I answered. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course he didn't. He told me not to mention it to you." She didn't speak at first. Then, "He thinks I'm the obstacle," she said. I remained silent. "And he's right," she added softly. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just true. "I'll be there," she repeated. "Let me handle the talking," I said. "I trust you," she replied. "But I also want him to see I'm not stepping aside." The strength in her voice was not loud. It was steady. The kind of strength that doesn't need volume. The days leading up to Thursday moved slowly. I kept busy. Small tasks, small movements, watering the garden, sorting the mail, cleaning the reading glasses I barely use. But underneath all of it, a slow pulse of tension. Steady, controlled, undeniable. Nora's photograph caught the afternoon light each day as the sun moved across the living room. I found myself looking at her more often. Not for answers, just for memory. She always believed families could be repaired with patience and presence. I used to believe that too. But some fractures are not accidents. They are decisions. On Thursday afternoon, I took the original estate documents and placed them into a slim black briefcase. Not hidden, not displayed. Prepared. The air outside had chilled, the sky hung low. The world was holding its breath. I stood at the mirror before I left the house. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Not weaker, just older. There's a kind of strength that survives age, the strength of someone who has seen storms and refused to be blown away. I took my keys, closed the door behind me. The dinner was calling, not as a meal, but as a stage, and I was walking directly toward it. Not to fight, not to accuse. I woke up early the day before the dinner. Not because of alarm or obligation. My mind simply refused to stay asleep. Sometimes, anticipation wakes you in ways anxiety cannot. Do you wake up early when something is weighing on you? The house was still dark when I walked to the kitchen. Even the refrigerator hum felt louder than usual. I brewed tea slowly, deliberately, the steam rising like quiet breath into the half-lit air. The day felt heavy before it even began. I sat at the table and unfolded Nora's letter. Not to read it, just to feel it. The paper had softened over the years from being opened so many times. The creases had become part of its structure, like memory embedded into fiber. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Looping, thoughtful, unhurried. Even her script had patience. Thomas, it began. If you are reading this, it means the kids are grown, and we are older now. Please remember, closeness is not the same as agreement, and love is not the same as surrender. I traced my finger over the ink. She had always known the difference between holding a family together and holding yourself hostage to it. The morning moved slowly. I went through ordinary tasks, sweeping the porch, trimming the rose bushes, wiping the kitchen counters, but the actions felt suspended, like time wasn't moving forward, just circling. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Claire stood there, hands in her coat pockets, expression soft. "I figured you might need company," she said. I stepped aside. No words needed. She made coffee for herself, tea for me. She remembered how much sugar I take. None. Nora used to make my tea the exact same way. We sat in the living room, not talking at first, just sitting. Sometimes conversation is not the point. Presence is. After a while, Claire looked toward the mantel. "That photograph," she said quietly. "I always liked that one." I followed her gaze, Evan's arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing. Nora behind the camera saying, "One more, but this time, actually smile." "That was before everything felt complicated," Claire added. "Everything always gets complicated," I replied. "We just notice it later." She nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. "Do you think he knows what he's doing?" she asked. I took my time before answering. "There are moments," I said slowly, "when I believe Evan is fully aware of every choice he's making. And then there are moments where I think he is just lost, trying to fill something he doesn't know how to name." Claire sat back, eyes thoughtful. "That doesn't make it less painful," she said. "No," I replied. "It doesn't." I opened the briefcase resting beside my chair and showed her the two versions of the estate document. I didn't explain. I just let her see. She didn't gasp. She didn't swear. She didn't cry. She just stared in a long, steady silence. Then, gently, she placed her hand on top of mine. "We'll handle this," she said. "Not you, we." That word changed the shape of the room. We spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through small details. Not strategy, not confrontation, just clarity. The original documents were placed back in the briefcase, the forged version folded separately, Nora's letter placed between them, like a compass. When evening came, Claire stood to leave. "You don't have to do this alone tomorrow," she said. "I know," I replied. She put on her coat, and for a moment she looked like she did when she was young. The same tilt of her head, the same gentleness behind her eyes. She hugged me, a quiet, steady embrace with no urgency in it. When she left, the house returned to stillness. But it felt different than before. Not hollow, not echoing, just waiting. I stood in front of the mantel once more. The photograph didn't look like the past anymore. It looked like a question. Where did the distance begin? How does love become something negotiable? And what happens tomorrow, when truth meets performance? The answers were already coming. They just hadn't arrived yet. I closed the letter. I latched the briefcase, and I sat in the quiet, breathing slowly, preparing not for conflict, but for clarity, because tomorrow would not be a dinner. I arrived 10 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because I needed to see the room before words began shaping it. Do you arrive early or late when something important is about to happen? The house Evan and Marissa lived in was modern, clean lines, white walls, furniture chosen by algorithm rather than sentiment. It was the kind of house meant to be looked at, not lived in. The door opened before I could knock. Marissa stood there, smiling again. That curated smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Thomas," she said warmly, like a rehearsed greeting in a staged play. "Come in." We were just finishing up. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the hallway. Not comforting, not home-like, intentional. Scent can be strategy, too. Evan appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron that felt more like a prop than clothing. "Dad," he said, voice light, too light. "Glad you're here," I nodded. "Smells good." "Trying something new," he said, pretending to laugh. "Thought we'd make this night special." Special. An interesting word. I stepped further in, and there it was. The table. Set deliberately. 6 chairs. Not 4. Not 3. 6. 1 for me. 1 for Evan. 1 for Marissa. 1 for Claire. And 2 extra. Symbolic? Witnesses? A performance needs an audience. The plates were arranged with precision. Napkins folded identically. Silverware aligned like drafted measurements. This was not dinner. This was staging. The stage of a quiet confrontation. I sat in the chair they had clearly chosen for me, at the far end of the table, facing the room, exposed. They placed Evan at the head, a power position. Marissa beside him, counsel. Claire's chair was empty, but waiting. "Would you like something to drink?" Marissa asked. "Water is fine," I said. The glass she placed in front of me was filled slightly less than the others. Not a mistake, a message. Control, control in centimeters. I looked around the room. No family photographs? Not one. A home without memory. Evan cleared his throat. "So, before she gets here, I just want to say, this dinner is about coming together, solving things, moving forward, always phrased as if the past were an inconvenience rather than origin. I didn't respond. I let silence stretch, not painfully, but purposefully. People reveal themselves in the spaces they try to fill. Marissa suddenly rose from her seat. "Let me get the documents," she said smoothly. "Documents, not papers, not the will. Documents. Legal, prepared before dinner." She returned with a leather binder, expensive, embossed, professional. She placed it in front of Evan like a weapon handed to its wielder. Before they could open it, the front door opened. Claire stepped in, not rushed, not apologetic. Calm. Her presence rearranged the temperature of the room. "Sorry I'm late," she said, though she wasn't late. Her eyes scanned the table, noting the place settings, noting the binder, noting the empty glasses. She sat beside me. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Evan exhaled. "Okay," he said. "Let's talk about the estate." He looked at me, not at Claire, not at Marissa. Me, as if the decision had already been made, as if this dinner were a formality. I folded my hands on the table. "Before we talk about the estate," I said, keeping my voice level, steady, and quiet, "I'd like to hear why you didn't want your sister here." There it was, A shift. A crack. Evan blinked. Marissa's smile froze, just slightly. A fracture in porcelain. "I never said that," Evan replied too quickly. Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her stillness was its own statement. I reached into the briefcase, at my side, and placed the original estate document, the true one, on the table. I didn't push it forward. I didn't present it. I simply set it down. The binder between Evan and Marissa suddenly felt heavier than the table could hold. No accusations, no raised voices, just presence. And presence can be louder than any confrontation. "This dinner," I said softly, "is a conversation. Not a transaction, not a performance, not a signature ceremony. A conversation." The room went still, like the air was holding its breath. Because they all knew. Tomorrow, truth would not need to shout. It would only need to be read. The food sat steaming on the table, but no one made a move to eat. Meals only nourish when there is peace. And peace was not invited to this dinner. Do you stay quiet in tense situations, or do you speak first? Evan inhaled and straightened his posture. He didn't do it consciously. It was instinct, the instinct of someone preparing to perform. "Dad," he began, his tone carefully measured, "we all know these conversations can be emotional. So I just want to set a calm tone tonight. No stress, no confrontation, just clarity. Clarity. A polished word to cover intentions." I studied him. His voice had a trained smoothness, practiced, perhaps rehearsed multiple times in a bathroom mirror or car windshield. Marissa watched him, the way a conductor watches a soloist, poised to adjust the tempo if necessary. Claire sat beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Not clenched, just present. Her silence was not passive. It was observant. Evan opened the leather binder. The soft rustle of turning paper sounded louder than it should have. He began speaking, as if narrating a business pitch. "The way things are now, the estate is structured in a way that could make things complicated in the future. Probate delays, property disputes, duplicated responsibilities. You know how these things can get messy. So the idea is to simplify," Claire interrupted, gently but firmly. "Simplify for who?" Evan didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the papers. He continued reading. To avoid potential conflict, the property and primary assets would transfer to a single managing party. It's more efficient, less legally risky. "Which managing party?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Evan swallowed. His jaw tightened. Still, he kept reading. "The primary beneficiary would be me, with all responsibilities consolidated." Marissa stepped in, placing her hand lightly on his forearm. "Thomas," she said, voice calm, "this is not about taking anything from anyone. This is about protecting what's already here. Evan is simply in the best position to handle things." "The best position?" Claire repeated, still quiet. Marissa nodded, smiling softly. "Yes. He has experience managing assets. He understands market dynamics. Well, you have your own life, your career, your world. We don't want you to feel burdened." There it was again. That subtle dismissal. The soft blade rapped in gentle tone. Claire didn't flinch. She only said, "You're assuming I don't want to be part of this family." Marissa's smile didn't break, but her eyes flickered. A small tell, a small crack. "This isn't personal," Marissa said. "When someone says this isn't personal, it is always personal." Evan shifted in his chair, sensing the tension. "Look," he said, turning to me. "Dad, you taught me to think logically. This is logic. Just one person handling things instead of two. You don't need to read every clause. I've gone through all of it already. There it was. The line. You don't need to read. I felt the room tighten around that sentence. Claire looked at me, not signaling, not guiding, just standing with me, without asking. I placed my fingertips lightly on the tabletop. Evan, I said calmly, you're speaking like someone who expects agreement. Not like someone seeking understanding. He blinked. This was not in the script he had prepared. I'm trying to make this easier, he said. For who? I asked. Silence. Finally, true silence. Not the polite kind from earlier. A silence that told the truth before anyone spoke it. Evan's voice dropped. There are opportunities I can't access without collateral. There it was. No metaphors. No softened phrasing. No careful posture. Just truth. Cracked open. Business opportunities, he added quickly, trying to control the exposure. Investment positioning. There are timelines. If I don't move now, the window closes. I let the words sit. A house is not shelter to him. It is leverage. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. You were going to use it. You didn't want it. You wanted to use it. Evan's composure fractured. Not broken. Just strained. He was no villain. He was a man cornered by his own aspirations, his own debts, his own unmet hunger. Marissa squeezed his hand under the table. We're all trying to move forward, she said softly. I nodded once. Then we'll move forward, I said. I reached to the briefcase beside me, but I did not open it. Not yet. Because timing is everything. Truth is strongest when spoken at the moment someone believes they have already won. I think I'll read the documents, I said. Evan's head lifted sharply. Dad, he began. I held up my hand. Just a small gesture. But small gestures can stop entire storms. Tomorrow, I said, when we're all here. The stage was not finished. This was only the curtain rising. I returned the next evening. Same house, same table, but something in the air had changed. Like the room already knew what was about to happen. If you're watching this, tell me, do you feel the tension in silence, or do you need words to notice it? Evan greeted me at the door, but there was no apron this time, no false casualness, no attempt at warmth. His expression held something new, urgency dressed as confidence. Marissa stood behind him, hands clasped lightly, posture composed, but her eyes moved quickly, scanning me. The briefcase I carried, the pace of my breathing. She was measuring the battlefield. Claire arrived moments later. She didn't knock. She simply walked in, as if she had always belonged to the space. She did. We sat. No dinner this time, no plates, no gestures of hospitality, just the binder on the table. The binder Evan had opened the night before. He placed his hand on it now. Dad, he began. His voice was softer, but tighter, like someone trying to hold a rope that was already slipping. I know this feels complicated, but we don't need to drag this out. He pushed the binder slightly closer to me. You don't need to read it. The sentence floated in the air, quiet, but sharp. No need to read it, Dad, he repeated, gentler, as if gentleness could reshape meaning. A stillness settled across the table. A stillness so complete, it made breathing feel loud. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched him. People reveal everything when you give them space to fill silence. Evan kept going. We've already gone through all of this. Marissa and I met with legal advisors. Everything is structured. Everything is fair. You just need to sign. Just need to sign. The softest phrases are often the most violent. Claire leaned forward slightly, but I lifted my hand, a tiny gesture, and she understood. Not yet. Marissa placed her fingertips on the binder too, as if to join the offering. It's honestly just a formality, she said. A formality. That word landed like a blade wrapped in velvet. A life's home. A family's history. The place where birthdays, grief, healing, and laughter lived. A formality. I looked at Evan. Really looked. His jaw was tight. His eyes darted every few seconds. His knee bounced beneath the table. He wasn't confident. He was collapsing inward, holding panic with posture. There is a special kind of heartbreak in realizing your child is not the villain, but the architect of their own undoing. I spoke quietly. What is so urgent, I asked, that I must sign without reading? His breath hitched, only for a fraction of a second. But enough. Marissa stepped in faster than he could. It's not urgency, she said. It's efficiency. I turned my gaze to her. She didn't look away. She believed she could out-talk consequence. Evan, I said again, ignoring her, offering him the dignity of being addressed directly. Why can't I read it? His eyes flicked downward. Because reading reveals truth. Because truth cannot be negotiated. Because signatures without understanding are the currency of desperation. He finally spoke. Because you'll hesitate, he said, voice cracking under its own weight. And I don't have time for hesitation right now. Not anger, not hostility, just exhaustion, and the quiet confession beneath it. He needed the house immediately. Not later. Not eventually. Now. Silence stretched again, deeper this time. I placed my hand on the briefcase beside me. Slowly, deliberately. Evan straightened, panicked. Dad, he said, the veneer breaking. Please. I opened the briefcase. The sound of the clasps releasing echoed. Not loudly, but meaningfully. I removed my version of the estate document and placed it on the table beside his binder. 2 stories, 2 intentions, 2 futures, side by side. I will read, I said. Not loud, not forceful, just final. Marissa's smile vanished. Not faded, vanished. Evan's shoulders sagged inward, like something inside him had been held up too long and finally collapsed. Claire closed her eyes once. Slow. A quiet exhale of recognition. The moment had arrived. Every lie, every pressure, every carefully shaped argument would now meet paper. Because paper doesn't flinch. Paper doesn't sway. Paper does not negotiate truth. I slid the documents toward the center of the table. Let's begin, I said, and the room felt like a courtroom, not with judges, not with witnesses, just truth, waiting to be read out loud. I didn't rush. I didn't speak quickly. I didn't try to dramatize anything. I simply opened the document. If you're watching this right now, tell me, do you prefer hearing the truth slowly or all at once? The pages made a soft sound when I turned them, like the quiet unfolding of something inevitable. Evan watched my hands instead of my eyes. Marissa watched both. Claire sat still, utterly still, the way someone sits when they already know what is coming, but they refuse to look away from it. I began reading, not with emphasis, not with commentary, just reading. In the event of the grantor's incapacitation, permanent residence shall be transferred to a single designated executor for continuity of property management. My voice was even. Evan's breathing wasn't. I continued. Said executor shall have full authority to adjust, refinance, or liquidate property assets at their discretion, without requiring secondary signatures or familial consultation. The words were calm, clinical, the language of paperwork, not family, but the implication was personal. Devastating. Claire's fingers curled slowly around the edge of the table. Marissa leaned in as if she were listening for a mispronunciation, some technical error she could pounce on. There wasn't one. I turned to the next page. The air in the room began to change. Not louder, tighter. These weren't just estate clauses. They were maneuvers. Primary beneficiary and executor. Evan Hale. Not equal distribution. Not shared stewardship. Not collaboration. Consolidation. Singular control. And then, the final line of this section, spoken quietly. Execution of transfer shall take place immediately upon notarized signature, not posthumously. I paused, not for effect, but because that sentence deserves silence. Immediate transfer, not after death, not after discussion, not after memory has been honored, but now, while I was sitting at the same table, while the house was still mine. While Nora's handwriting still lived on recipe cards in the kitchen drawer. It was an extraction disguised as inheritance. Evan exhaled shakily. His hands were clasped together, white-knuckled. Marissa placed her hand over his, gently, reassuringly, but her eyes were fixed on me. Control never looks away from threat. I continued reading. Some sentences were short, some were long, all were revealing. The justification clauses, the tax explanation, the liability shield, the refinancing permission, the right to liquidate assets in the event of personal emergency needs. Personal emergency, not my emergency, not Claire's, his. The room didn't move. The food on the table might as well have been wax. No one drank water. The only sound was my voice, steady even, and the occasional quiet turn of a page. Finally, I reached the paragraph that would expose the entire intention. Executor reserves the right to list the property as collateral for investment-based borrowing, financing, or leveraged acquisition. Claire closed her eyes, not because she was surprised, but because the truth had finally been spoken out loud. Not implied, not hinted, not guessed. Stated. Evan hadn't wanted the house. He wanted what the house could buy him. Opportunity. Risk. The next gamble in a long chain of gambles. I placed the final page on the table. No drama. Just gravity. The silence after the reading was immense. Silence that had weight, shape, temperature. I looked at Evan. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defiant. He was breaking. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. I didn't mean, he started, but Marissa tightened her grip on his hand. Not comforting, correcting. Her eyes on him said, "Stay composed." But his composure was already gone. Claire spoke first, softly. "You were going to take Dad's home to cover your debts." Evan's head dropped. Not denial, collapse. The truth had oxygen now, and once the truth breathes, nothing suffocates it again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't punish. I simply said, "We're not done," because there was one more document in the briefcase. One written long before any of us reached this moment. One written in a hand more loving and more honest than all of us. Nora's, and her voice would speak next. I didn't speak right away. No one did. The room held its own breath, as if waiting to see what shape the truth would take now that it was out in the open. Do you think truth destroys families, or does it simply show what was already broken? I slid the forged document a little closer, not dramatically, just enough that its presence sharpened. Then I lifted it, holding it at an angle beneath the overhead light. The watermark appeared slowly, faint, almost shy, but unmistakable. Marissa's consulting firm logo, not Evan's handwriting, not my attorney's office, not a clerical update, a deliberate replacement, crafted, printed, inserted. Marissa S.'s expression didn't break, but the stillness around her shifted, like the moment before glass cracks. Evan blinked, once, twice, confusion first, then realization, then something like fear. He hadn't known, not the extent. He had trusted someone else to handle details, and she had. Claire leaned forward slightly, just enough for her voice to carry clearly. You rewrote Dad's estate document using your company's templates. Marissa didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands. Yes, she said, because the original plan was outdated, inefficient, vulnerable. I was trying to protect the family's assets. Protect. That word rang hollow. Claire's voice remained low, steady. What were you protecting them from? The pause that followed was too long to be innocent. Evan spoke too quickly. From probate, from taxes, from delays, from— No, Claire said, her tone soft but sharp as glass. You were protecting them from being out of your reach. Marissa inhaled, just once, and then said, A family is strongest when its resources are unified. Unified. Another word disguised as generosity, while meaning control. I turned the page, not to argue, but to continue reading aloud. And there it was, the clause that stripped away every pretense. Executor retains full right to withdraw equity from said property to satisfy urgent outstanding obligations. Obligations, not investments, not opportunities, not plans. Debts, Evans, hands closed around each other tightly, knuckles whitening like bone beneath skin. His breathing came faster now. The truth had exposed itself fully. He needed the house, not for legacy, not for care, not for memory, but to keep something from collapsing. Evan, I said quietly, who do you owe? He stared at the table. Not answering was answer enough. Claire closed her eyes and exhaled. Not in shock, but in mourning. Because this wasn't betrayal powered by greed. This was desperation powered by pride. And pride is a lonely kind of hunger. Marissa spoke next, still calm. You are framing this emotionally. That's not rational. Evan is the one who understands market positioning. He has potential. He just needs leverage to risk again? Claire asked. To gamble again? I added. To lose again? Claire finished. Marissa's smile disappeared entirely now. What remained was calculation. But Evan, he broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. He just slowly lowered his head into his hands. I thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed, he said, voice thin, unsteady. I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to look weak. I just needed one win. There it was. Not villainy. Not malice. Just the echo of a boy who once needed permission to fail and never learned how to give it to himself. I looked at him, not with anger, with grief. Not for myself, for him, but the truth does not dissolve simply because it is understood. Understanding does not erase consequence. I placed the original document, the real estate plan, on the table, and then I placed Nora's letter atop both, not to accuse, to anchor, to remind. The room fell into a silence that was not empty, but full of memory, full of history, full of every moment that had led to this one. I spoke quietly. We're not finished here. Not a threat, a boundary. And boundaries are the language of love that refuses to be taken advantage of. Tomorrow, the confrontation would not be about signatures or clauses. It would be about truth spoken aloud. Because the next chapter does not belong to strategic voices or desperate voices. It belongs to Nora's voice. Nobody stood up. Nobody tried to leave. The confrontation didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like stillness, the kind that carries weight simply by existing. If you're here watching this, tell me, when you're hurt, do you go quiet, or do you raise your voice? The overhead light hummed, a small, persistent sound that filled the silence between us. Evan had not lifted his head yet. His fingers were linked, his forehead resting against them. He looked less like a man defending a position and more like a child who finally ran out of places to hide. Marissa was the only one who moved. She straightened. Her posture smoothed her sleeve and recentered her expression into composure, control. Even now. Let's not make this dramatic, she said. Not to me, to Claire. As if Claire were the threat here, as if the truth spoken aloud was the emotional intrusion. Claire didn't react. She didn't even look at Marissa. She was watching Evan. Why didn't you tell us? She asked him, gently, painfully so. He finally lifted his head. His eyes were wet, but not with tears that would fall. Just a thin, glassy layer that made him look younger. I didn't want to be the failure, he whispered. The words landed with more force than anything Marissa had tried to explain. I kept thinking the next deal would fix everything. The next client, the next investment, the next loan. I just needed one thing to work. Claire swallowed. Her voice wavered, not from anger, but heartbreak. So you decided to use Dad's home, our home, as collateral? Evan nodded once, small, barely visible. But I thought if he signed willingly, it wouldn't be taking. It would just be support. Support. That word cracked something open, quietly, like the sound of ice shifting underfoot. I spoke softly. Support is something asked for, not taken in secret. Evan closed his eyes, and this time he did cry. Not loudly, not shaking, just quiet tears that pooled, held, and fell slowly. They were the kind of tears that don't ask to be seen. Marissa's jaw tightened, her voice sharpened, not loud, but precise. This family needed leadership, she said. Direction, efficiency. Somebody had to make decisions. You've been sentimental for years, Thomas. That's not sustainable. Claire turned her head, slowly, deliberately, and looked at Marissa. Her voice was steady. You came into this family. You married into something that existed long before you. And you believed you could reshape it by force of will. But you didn't learn the history before trying to rewrite it. Marissa's smile vanished. Not faded. Disappeared. And for the first time since the dinner began, she looked uncertain. Not guilty. Not remorseful. Just unsure. Control had slipped. I reached for the original estate document, opened it to the first page, the version Nora and I had discussed together. The version born from years of shared life, not market logic. I spoke calmly. When Nora and I wrote this, the goal wasn't efficiency or strategy. It was fairness, continuity, trust. I tapped the page lightly, not angrily. This was written by love, not leverage. Evan's breath shuddered. Marissa's gaze lowered. Claire closed her hand over mine, a small gesture, grounding. I slid the forged version toward the center of the table, beside the original, side by side. Truth beside manipulation. One document heavy with memory. One document hollow with ambition. Our family, I said, is not an acquisition, and it will not be treated as one. The sentence wasn't loud, but it was final. Evan covered his face again, but this time there was no hiding in it. No performance, no strategy, only consequence. The room felt smaller now, not suffocating, just intimate, like something long avoided had finally come home. Claire spoke again, barely above a whisper. Evan, we could have helped you. You didn't have to do this alone. He looked up, grief carved into every feature. I didn't know how to ask. And there it was. The tragedy inside the wrongdoing. Not greed, not cruelty, shame. The oldest cage a person can build for themselves. I didn't offer forgiveness. That would come later, if at all. But I did offer presence. We're not finished, I said quietly. But we are not walking away. No one spoke after that. We just sat, 4 people in the same room, finally looking at the same truth. But we hadn't reached the heart yet, because there was still one voice left to be heard. A voice no one in that room could interrupt. Nora's. I did not pull out the letter immediately. The room was still trembling from the truth we had already laid bare. Rushing this moment would have been disrespectful. To everyone, but especially to her. When you remember someone you've lost, does it come all at once or in fragments? The table remained silent. No one moved. No one tried to fill the space. It was the kind of silence that has weight. A silence that knows something sacred is about to enter. I reached into the briefcase, not with hesitation, but with care. The letter wasn't in an envelope. I never kept it sealed. Paper grows tired when folded too many times, but this one had kept its shape. The same way some memories never soften, no matter how many years pass. I placed the letter on the table. No one breathed, not because they were afraid, but because the moment demanded stillness. Nora's handwriting was unmistakable, curved, gentle, a script born from patience, not haste. I didn't look at Evan. I didn't look at Claire. I didn't look at Marissa. I looked at the letter, and I began to read. My voice did not waver. It didn't need to. The letter carried itself. My love, if you are reading this, it means the children are grown, and I am no longer there to say these words myself. Parenting does not end when children become adults. It only changes shape. The room softened. Even the air seemed to settle. I continued, if they disagree, do not choose sides. If they struggle, do not rescue them too quickly. And if they try to pull you in opposite directions, stay still. They will come back to center. But they must find it themselves. Evan's eyes were fixed on the table, unblinking. Claire's eyes glimmered, but no tears fell. She was listening with her whole body. Thomas, you know their hearts. You have always known. Claire will stay close, because love is her language. Evan will walk far because proving himself is his. Evan's breath caught, sharp, almost inaudible. The letter kept speaking. Do not punish him for that. but do not let him take from you what he has not yet learned to value. Marissa's composure broke, not visibly, but internally. Her shoulders stiffened. Her breath hitched once, barely. She realized this letter was not an argument. It was truth spoken before any of us arrived here. I continued, slowly. If he reaches for more than is fair, it is not greed. It is fear. The world makes promises to sons that it does not keep. Claire closed her hand around Evan's wrist, not to restrain, to remind. He didn't pull away. The letter went on. Your job is not to give them everything they ask for. Your job is to give them each what their heart cannot find alone. I paused, to breathe, to stay steady. Give Claire trust. Give Evan responsibility, not rescue. And give yourself grace. You will feel guilt no matter what you choose. Let it pass through you. It will fade. The room felt smaller now, softer, more honest. I love them. I love you. And I trust you to finish what we started. With kindness, with firmness, with love that does not surrender itself. I folded the letter once, gently, and placed it in the center of the table. No one spoke. This was not a moment for dialogue. It was a moment of recognition. Evan's face had changed, not in expression, in understanding. His defenses had dropped. His excuses had thinned. His internal world had been seen, softly, without attack. He whispered, barely audible, "She knew me." Claire's voice joined his, quiet, steady. She always did. I looked at both of them, not as adversaries, not as heirs, as my children. Your mother didn't ask me to choose between you, I said. She asked me to stay strong enough to love you both, even when it hurts. Claire wiped one tear. Just one. Evan nodded. Once. Small, but real. Marissa said nothing, because there are moments no strategy can touch. This was one of them. I rested my hand on the letter. Tomorrow, we would deal with consequences. Tomorrow, decisions would be made. Tomorrow, boundaries would be drawn. But for tonight, we sat together, not resolved, not broken, just seen. We didn't stay much longer after the letter. There was no dramatic exit, no accusations thrown into the air. The night didn't end with shouting. It ended with an exhale. If you're here with me, tell me. After difficult conversations, do you feel lighter or heavier? The chairs scraped softly against the floor as we stood. Not one of us looked at the others right away. We all needed quiet. Claire walked out first, gently brushing her hand along Evan's shoulder on her way. Not forgiveness, just contact. A reminder that connection didn't vanish just because trust had bent. Evan stayed seated, bent forward slightly, like someone learning how to breathe again. Marissa remained still, but something in her posture had changed. Her spine wasn't as straight. Her chin didn't tilt as confidently. The room no longer belonged to her. I gathered the documents and the letter, not rushed. There was a care to it. Paper holds memory whether we want it to or not. Evan finally spoke. "Dad!" His voice was quiet, uncertain, and real. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was withholding, but because I didn't want to respond from reaction. This required presence. He swallowed, eyes still lowered. I didn't know how to stop. I kept thinking if I just fixed one thing, everything would fall back into place. I nodded once. None of this needed elaboration. The truth had already been spoken. You don't have to fix it alone, I said. His breath stuttered. A crack in a frozen lake. Marissa looked at him then, sharply, trying to read whether he believed me more than her. But this was not her moment anymore. It was his. I didn't ask questions. I didn't lecture. I didn't tell him he was wrong. I simply placed a quiet truth between us. You can ask for help. You don't have to drown to prove you can swim. Evan let out a small, broken laugh. The kind that isn't humor, just release. I don't know how, he said. I know, I replied. That's why we start now. Not fixing, not erasing, learning. The drive home was silent. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt, but needs space. Streetlights passed like slow pulses of dim gold. Tires whispered against asphalt. My fingers rested loosely on the steering wheel. The air was cool enough to keep me awake. When I reached the house, I didn't turn on the lights. The living room, in darkness, felt more honest than it did illuminated. I sat in Nora's chair. It still carried the faint scent of lavender. Or maybe memory plays tricks when you need it to. I let myself breathe. Not deeply, not shakily. Just breathe. There's a difference between being exhausted and being emptied. Tonight, I was emptied, not defeated. Simply cleared out. The room did not feel lonely. It felt neutral, like the storm had passed and the sky had not yet chosen whether to rain again or clear. I placed the documents on the coffee table. Then I placed Nora's letter on top. Her voice had already done what mine could not. It had softened the edges of hardness in my son. I whispered aloud, not to the room, not to memory, but to her. I did what you asked, not proudly, not mournfully, just truthfully. I leaned back, let the stillness settle around me. The night did not feel heavy anymore. It felt open, like tomorrow was not a battle waiting, but a reconstruction, a slow one, a gentle one, a necessary one. The next morning, the world went on as if nothing had happened. Birds sang, trash trucks rumbled down the street. A neighbor watered their garden. The ordinary world does not stop for personal transformation, but something in me had shifted. I poured tea, held the cup between my palms, watched the steam rise like breath I had been holding for years. Not peace, but something close to it. The kind of quiet that comes when a truth has finally stopped running. The kind of quiet that waits for what comes next. I drove to Patterson's office the next morning, not because I was angry, not because I needed revenge, but because clarity without structure dissolves, and I needed this to hold. If you're here with me, tell me, do you handle hard things immediately, or do you wait until you feel ready? The law office was small, brick-fronted, with ivy climbing up the side like it was trying to go somewhere else. Inside, the air smelled of paper and ink, that subtle, grounding scent of decisions being recorded. Mr. Patterson greeted me the same way he always had, with patience, not assumptions. He was in his early 70s, silver-haired, glasses resting, too low on his nose, a man who believed in formalities because formalities prevent misunderstandings. He didn't ask how my evening went. He simply gestured to the chair across from him. "Let's take our time," he said. We sat, and the room became a place where emotion stepped aside to let process work. I placed the briefcase on the desk and opened it. First, the original estate document, then the forged one. Finally, Nora's letter. Mr. Patterson did not rush. He did not react. He simply examined the pages with the practiced calm of someone who has seen the best and worst of families, often in the same week. He held the forged page up to the light, just as I had, revealing the faint watermark. He nodded once. "This is not a clerical update," he said softly. "This is replacement, not speculation, not emotion. Fact." I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not relief, not satisfaction. Just recognition. "Truth? Validated," Patterson continued, voice steady. "Your son didn't write this. He may have believed he understood it. But this language," he tapped the margins lightly, "belongs to someone who drafts leverage contracts, not family documents." No judgment in his tone, just assessment. I appreciated that. Emotion belongs at the table. Law belongs here. "Can it be reversed?" I asked. "Yes," he replied simply. "Not dramatically, just truthfully." "Can it be prevented from happening again?" I asked. "Yes," he said again. He slid a clean legal pad in front of us. "Let's restructure the estate so that intention cannot be altered by urgency." That was the sentence I needed. Not punishing Evan. Not stripping him of inheritance. Protecting the intent Nora and I agreed on. We worked slowly, line by line, through a revision that would become final. Shared property rights. Transparent execution. No unilateral control. No collateralization of the home. No refinancing authority without joint approval. Independent oversight if either child becomes financially compromised. And something new. If one child's circumstances become unstable, the estate temporarily shifts protective stewardship to the other. Not ownership, stewardship. Not punishment, not reward. Balance. Claire's strength would not overshadow Evan. Evan's struggles would not endanger Claire. This was not about fairness on paper. This was about fairness in reality. A difference many families forget. Patterson drafted the affidavit confirming the original will as legally binding and the revised terms as the final expression of intention. His handwriting was slow, neat, careful. Like he understood that the weight of ink sometimes outweighs the weight of emotion. We reviewed every sentence. Not once did my hand shake. Not once did I doubt the choice. This wasn't retaliation. It was protection. When he finished, Patterson placed the papers in front of me. 2 signature lines, one for him to witness, one for me to anchor. I signed. The pen didn't feel heavy. It felt exact. Patterson added his signature, then the embossed seal, a quiet click that landed like a closing door. "This is now the governing document," he said. No ceremony, just law. He leaned back slightly, looking at me the way only an old friend can. "Thomas," he said, "you didn't come here to win. You came here to restore." I nodded. Yes. Because love is not letting someone take everything. Love is preserving what is shared and guiding what is lost. I stood, closed the briefcase, thanked him as I walked out. The air outside felt different. Not lighter, not brighter, just settled. The storm had not ended, but it had direction, and storms with direction do not destroy. They change. The next step was not legal. It was human. Evan needed to face me, without urgency, without documents, without strategy, just as a son who didn't know how to ask for help. And I needed to face him not as a victim, not as a judge, but as a father who finally understood the shape of his son's fear. I didn't call Evan. I didn't announce I was coming. Some conversations only work when they aren't planned. If you're here with me, tell me. Have you ever watched someone you love unravel slowly, long before they realized it themselves? His building was newer, glass and steel, clean edges and geometric order. Architecture trying to pretend personal lives are as simple as straight lines. The elevator hummed softly as it rose. My reflection in the doors looked tired. Yes, but not defeated. There is a difference. I reached his floor and walked down the hallway. Neutral carpet. Muted lighting. The kind of place designed so no one's personal story leaks into the walls. His door was slightly open. Not enough to be careless. Just enough to say someone came home and didn't finish arriving. I knocked once, gently, and pushed it open. The lights were off. Curtains drawn. But the room was not dark. The afternoon. Light had fought its way in through the cracks, thin lines of pale gold cutting across the floor. Evan sat on the couch, not collapsed, not slumped, just sitting, hands in his lap, breathing shallow, like someone waiting for something to happen that already had. He didn't look up immediately. He didn't need to. He knew it was me. "Dad," he said quietly. Not ashamed, not defensive, just tired. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. Not to trap the moment, but to give it privacy. I didn't sit right away. I looked around. The apartment was neat. Too neat. Neat in the way spaces become when a person is trying to hold control by force. A stack of unopened mail sat on the counter. A glass of water, half drunk, on the table. Phone face down, trying to stop the world by turning it over. I sat in the armchair across from him. We didn't speak for a while. Silence is often the safest language when everything else is too sharp. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were red. Not from fresh crying, but from the kind that dries into exhaustion. "I messed up," he said. Not a confession. A conclusion. I nodded. Not to agree, but to acknowledge. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his palm like he used to when he was small. I kept thinking if I could just get ahead, just once, everything would balance out. I never meant to. His voice cracked. I never meant to hurt anyone. I believed him. Intention does not erase consequence, but truth matters. "What are you afraid of?" I asked softly. He swallowed, hard. "Being nothing," he whispered. "Being the one who didn't become anything. The one who didn't live up to—" He stopped, but I knew the end of the sentence. Live up to me. And the grief of that landed heavier than anger ever could. I spoke carefully. "You don't have to be impressive to be loved." He closed his eyes. And that was when he broke. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just a quiet collapse inward. Shoulders folding. Breathing unsteady. Quiet. Painful exhale. The kind that shakes and doesn't stop. Not collapse like failure. Collapse like release. I didn't move to hold him. Holding him now would have taken the lesson away. A person must face their own breaking before they can rebuild. So I just sat there, present, unmoving, witnessing. He eventually steadied, not recovered, just emptied again. When he spoke, it was fragile. What do I do now? There was no simple answer. But I knew this. Rebuilding is not loud. It does not announce itself. It begins with one act, not fixing, not earning, not proving, admitting. "You start," I said, "by telling Claire the truth yourself." His jaw tightened. Not resistance, fear. "I'll be there," I added, before the fear became decision. He nodded. Slow, small, but real. Then I stood. He didn't ask me to stay. I didn't ask if he would be okay. Some moments end not because they are resolved, but because they are understood. I walked to the door, hand on the knob. Behind me, I heard him whisper, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't turn around. "I never will," I said. But love, from now on, would not mean surrender. It would mean structure. And structure was already being written. I called Claire the next morning. Not early, not urgently. Just enough time for the night to cool into something easier to speak through. If you're watching this, tell me, who is the person in your life who steadies you when everything else leans? She answered on the second ring. Dad? Her voice was clear, awake, present, not bracing, not worried. She already knew something had shifted. Can you come by? I asked. Of course, she said, and there was no hesitation in it. She arrived 20 minutes later, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. One black, one with the exact amount of milk I prefer. She didn't need to ask. Some people love through remembering. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where all of this began. Except today, it felt different. Not a battlefield, just a table again. She placed her coffee down and waited. She never pushes. She waits for truth to arrive in the shape it needs to take. I told her what happened at Evan's apartment. Not every detail, not every breath, just enough to draw the shape of the moment. She listened the way only someone who has carried the same history can listen. Not to respond, but to understand. When I finished, she nodded once. Good, she said. Not cold, not detached, just steady. He needs to be the one to speak next, she continued. We've said enough. He has to come toward us now. There was no anger in her voice, only clarity. I looked at her then. Really looked. Her strength was not loud. It didn't show itself through argument or defense. Her strength was in stillness, the kind that doesn't collapse when pressure comes. She was Nora's child in that way. I'm sorry you had to carry so much of this, I said. She shook her head gently. No, I didn't carry it. I witnessed it. That's different. You're the one who held the weight. Her words didn't try to comfort. They simply told the truth. And truth, when spoken gently, heals without needing to insist on healing. We sat quietly for a while. The sound of wind moving the curtains, distant traffic, the small creak of the house settling into itself. No urgency, no rush. Finally, Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a folded packet of papers. What's that? I asked. She slid them toward me. I drafted something, she said. Not legal, just structure. For us. I unfolded it. It wasn't a plan or a contract or a strategy. It was a set of agreements, written in plain human language. We speak directly. We don't assume intentions. We ask before we offer. We don't make financial decisions alone. We tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We choose the family's future together, not individually. There was a blank line at the bottom for each of our names, not to sign today, not to force commitment, just to say, we are not done, we are beginning again. My throat tightened, not with sadness, not with relief, with recognition. Claire, I said quietly, you're the balance. She smiled, small, soft, real. I know, she said. Mom told me once, a long time ago. I blinked. She did? Claire nodded. I was maybe 15. She said, your father will love with his whole heart. Your brother will love by chasing the world. And you, her, voice warmed, softened. You will love by holding the ground steady, so they both have somewhere to return to. Nora had known everything. We didn't speak for a long time after that. We didn't need to. We just sat, quietly, safely, with the knowledge that the family wasn't broken. It was bruised, bent, exhausted, but not finished. When Claire stood to leave, she rested her hand on my shoulder. "I'll be here when he calls," she said. Not if, when a future built into a sentence. After she left, the house didn't feel large anymore. It felt held, not by walls, not by memory, by the quiet strength of a daughter who refused to let love collapse into loss. The next chapter would not be easy, but it would not be alone. The house felt quiet the next morning, but not empty. Not like before. This quiet was intentional, the quiet of a room that has finally stopped bracing for impact. When you make a hard decision, do you feel it sharply, or does it settle slowly like dust in sunlight? I sat at the kitchen table again, the same table where the documents were first placed, where the dinner was planned, where the truth unfolded. Except today, there was no tension in its wood, just memory. I laid out the original estate document gently, smoothing its edges with my palm. Then I placed the revised, notarized version beside it. Not to compare, not to confirm, but to acknowledge the difference between fear and intention. Fear writes urgency. Intention writes clarity. Nora and I had written out of intention. Yesterday, the law had honored that intention again. Now, I needed to put that clarity into the world our family actually lived in. Not just on paper, but in conversation, action, and direction. I called Claire first. She arrived within the hour. She didn't bring coffee this time. She didn't need to. When she sat down, she placed her hands flat on the table, mirroring mine. "Tell me how it looks," she said. I slid the revised estate documents to her. She read silently, eyes moving steadily line by line. Not skimming, not reacting, simply taking in. She nodded occasionally. Small acknowledgments of alignment, not surprise. When she reached the clause assigning shared stewardship, she exhaled softly. "This is fair," she said. Not emotional, not relieved, just certain. I felt something warm in my chest. Not pride, not victory, just rightness. We spoke through the structure. No one person could alter the property alone. Significant financial decisions required mutual agreement. Neither sibling could use shared assets to solve private crises. Legacy was to be preserved, not leveraged. It wasn't about protecting the house. It was about protecting us. I signed the final confirmation of the revised estate plan in Claire's presence. Not because I needed a witness, but because I wanted her to know this was hers to hold too. When I finished, I set the pen down. The sound was small. The meaning was not. Claire placed her hand on top of mine. "We're choosing peace," she said softly. "Yes," I replied, "but peace with boundaries." She smiled, one of the few full smiles I had seen from her in weeks. Then she asked the question we both already knew the answer to. "And Evan?" "He'll need to see the document," I said. "Not as punishment. As reality," Claire nodded. "We'll show him together," she said. "Not a defense, not a shield, a bridge." The rest of the day passed quietly, not as avoidance, but as transition. I walked through the house, slowly, touching surfaces that held years inside them. The stair railing Nora used to run her hand along, the living room corner where the kids built forts, the kitchen counter where she taught them how to measure flour without making a mess, which, of course, always became a mess. The house was not Walls and roof. It was time. It was presence. It was belonging. And belonging cannot be collateral. The sun was setting when the phone rang. Evan, not rushed, not panicked, just his name on the screen. I answered. Dad, he said quietly, I'm ready to talk. I didn't say good. I didn't say finally. I didn't say I told you so. I just said, when can you come over? He exhaled. Tomorrow morning. I'll be there. Good, I said. Not cold, not warm. Clear. We hung up. I looked around the Babivaideu house once more. It did not feel threatened anymore. It did not feel fragile. It felt steady because legacy was no longer something to be defended. It was something to be shared, not equally, but responsibly. There is a difference. And tomorrow, for the first time in a long time, we would stand in that difference together. Evan arrived just after 9 the next morning. No car screeching into the driveway. No hurried footsteps. Just a quiet knock. The kind of knock a person uses when they is unsure they're welcome. Who knocks softly on your door? I opened it, and he stood there, hands in his coat pockets. Not from cold. It wasn't that kind of morning, but because he didn't know what to do with them. He looked different today. Not defeated. Not afraid. Just honest. Morning, he said. Come in, I answered. We walked to the living room, and I gestured to the couch. He sat. I didn't. I remained standing for a moment, just long enough to let the air settle between us. Then I sat across from him. No table between. No documents, just space, and 2 people learning how to fill it again. He looked around the room, like he was seeing it for the first time. The photos, the ceiling lines, the lived-in places memory shows itself. This house feels smaller than I remember, he said. I nodded. It always did. You just grew fast. He let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. I did, he said softly. Silence again. Not tense, just unfamiliar. He rubbed his hands together. Paused, then spoke. I read Mom's letter again last night. His voice didn't break, but it weakened around the edges. I nodded once. And? He didn't answer right away. He swallowed hard, eyes blinking slow. She saw me, he said. The words were simple, but heavy, the kind of heavy that sits behind your ribs and doesn't move. She always did, I replied. He nodded again, this time faster, like he was trying to keep himself from unraveling right there. I wanted to be everything she thought I could be, he said. I wanted to be big, successful, impressive, someone she would be proud of. He looked up at me then, and the boy in him was clear. The boy who used to stand on chairs to be taller, who used to talk fast when he was excited, who used to run ahead on walks and turn around to make sure we were still following. But I kept falling short, he whispered. The shame was no longer defensive. It was truthful. I spoke, carefully. You didn't fall short. You just tried to outrun yourself. He looked down again, not from shame this time, but from recognition. I leaned forward slightly. Evan, listen to me. He did. Fully. You don't need to impress us. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win to be worthy. His eyes closed, just for a moment. He nodded. Once, slowly, I know, he said. I think I know that now. There was no triumph. In the moment, no cinematic swell, just quiet, understanding. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the coffee table between us. A handwritten note. Not typed, not formal, not practiced. Just ink. I didn't pick it up, not because I didn't want to read it, but because some things should be opened. When the room is completely still, I'll take responsibility for what I did, he said. No excuses, no explanations. I'll talk to Claire. I'll talk to the attorney. I'll do whatever needs to be done. His voice held no performance, only choice. I know you changed the estate, he continued, and I'm not asking you to undo it. I understand why. I accept it. There was no resentment in his tone, only acceptance. And I want to earn trust again, slowly, the right way. If you'll let me. That sentence was the real turning point, not sorry, not forgive me, not let's go back, but I'll earn this, slowly. That is ownership. That is repair. Oh, finally leaned back in my chair. The house didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel strained. It felt like something was returning, carefully, to where it belonged. We'll move slowly, I said. His shoulders softened, not dropped, softened, like the body unclenches when it realizes it no longer needs to defend itself. Yes, he said, slow is good. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, we just sat there, quietly, in the same room again. And sometimes, that is the beginning, not forgiveness, not resolution. The days that followed unfolded gently, not perfectly, not joyfully, just gently, which, after everything, felt like grace. If you're here right now, tell me, how do you know when a chapter in your life is ending? The house was quiet that morning. Sunlight stretched across the floor in a long, warm stripe, like a slow invitation to exhale. The air felt soft, not like relief, more like rest. I sat at the dining table, the same table that had held tension, history, anger, truth. Today, there were no documents on it, just a notebook. My notebook. I opened it to a fresh page. The paper felt clean. New ready. Not to forget what had happened, but to hold what comes next. I didn't rush to write. Some words need time to reach the hand from the heart. Eventually, they came. Not eloquent, not poetic, simple. We lived through the hardest part. I paused. Let the sentence breathe. Claire came later in the morning. She didn't knock. She just walked in, and I was glad for that. Her presence no longer felt like support. It felt like continuity. She made 2 cups of tea, set one in front of me, sat down. No conversation needed. We had learned to share silence. Well, after a while, she asked, "Do you think he'll be okay?" I didn't answer right away. "Not immediately," I said, "but eventually, if he lets things break where they need to." She nodded, not hoping, not expecting, just trusting the process. "Will you let him come home for dinner sometime?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "when he comes as who he is, not who he thinks he has to be." She smiled, small and warm. "That's fair. We didn't need to speak more." Later, she left for work. Normal life resumed, like it always does. In the afternoon, I went to the cemetery. The walk was quiet. The breeze light, birds loud enough to remind the world was moving forward, even when we are standing still. Nora's headstone was simple, just the way she wanted. No inscriptions about legacy or eternity. Just her name and the years she lived. Years that still echo in everything. I sat beside the grave. Not grieving. Not talking. Just being there. After a while, I unfolded the letter. Not to read it. I already knew every syllable. I placed it gently at the base of the stone, smoothing the edges so the wind wouldn't lift it. "You were right," I said softly, "not to the grave, to the memory that shaped us. Love isn't giving everything away to keep peace. Love is staying when it's difficult and holding shape when others can't." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They stayed, like she always had, sat until the light shifted, until evening began its slow descent, until I felt the quiet settle all the way into my bones. Then I stood, not heavy, not reluctant, just ready. Taniin, kind of ready that comes after acceptance. That night, back at home, I returned to my notebook. The page was still open. I wrote, "Families do not break in one moment. They bend quietly, over years, and they heal the same way. Slowly, carefully, without applause." I closed the notebook. I slid it into a small envelope and placed it in the desk drawer beside Nora's letter. Not to seal the past, but to remember the shape of what we came through. Before bed, I turned off the lights one room at a time. Not out of habit, but ceremony. The house didn't feel too big anymore. It felt lived in, held, true. I stood at the top of the stairs for a moment, listening. No tension, just home. I whispered. Not for anyone else to hear. We're okay. Not perfect, not mended, just okay. And that is an ending. Not a dramatic one. Not a triumphant one. A human one, a real one. The story didn't end in punishment or victory, but in balance. The kind Nora asked for, the kind we earned. One page at a time.